Hey there, it's Bram Kanstein, and in this episode of Bitcoin for Millennials, I'm joined by Zuby, an independent author, podcast host, and creative entrepreneur with millions of followers, known for his sharp takes on society, culture, and personal development. Zuby is also a passionate Bitcoin advocate, and together we explore how thinking for yourself, questioning the status quo, and embracing Bitcoin can lead to true individual empowerment and financial freedom. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or already deep down the rabbit hole, this conversation is packed with insights about mindset, taking responsibility, and how to navigate a world flooded with information and distraction. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you do too. Now let's dive in. Thanks so much for coming on. I've been following you with interest over the past year, so I'm excited to chat. Also very cool to see that you're a new father as well, and you're really into Bitcoin, so I think there's enough to jam about today.
No doubt, man. Happy to go wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, so I was thinking, you often speak about the importance of thinking for yourself, and in a world saturated with information and groupthink and lots of fake content now also with AI and stuff, what kind of like practical steps you think young people can take to kind of like cultivate independent thought, especially in this world where there's just so much? It's funny, my 7-year-old started to talk about brain rot 2 weeks ago, and I was like, how did you learn the term brain rot? And then he said, I know not to look at it. I said, amazing. I don't know how you came up with that, but so I'm trying to cultivate that, but perhaps for our like generational peers, how can we kind of like help ourselves to really think for ourselves and stay critical in an age like this?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, man, and it's an enormous one. I'm increasingly coming to the conclusion that I don't think everybody can. I think that pretty much all human traits are on a bell curve, meaning that, most people are somewhere around the middle or give or take 1 or 2 standard deviations. And then you've got extremes on other ends. And I'm starting to believe that that is also true of agency. And it's true of critical thinking capacity. And it's true of just everything, not just the obvious things like, people will talk about IQ, or they'll talk about height, or they'll talk about physical strength, or creativity, these types of things. People kind of recognize that there's a bell curve on these. But I think it's true of virtually every single trait. And I think that there are people who have a very high capacity to be highly critical thinking, and who have a very high capacity to, people who have a lot of agency. And if someone is high agency, then essentially what I mean by that is they have an internal locus of control, and they believe that they are essentially in charge of their decision making. They believe that they have free will, or certainly at least a strong illusion of it, and they can make decisions day to day that are going to affect their outcome. They're happy to own their wins and own their losses. They don't tend to think that they're just part of, they're just a cog in the machine of society, culture, politics, the economy, and it's just kind of blowing wherever the wind takes them. So they're super high agency people. And then on the other end, there's an extreme low end of that, where people, not only do they behave in that way, but they also truly don't believe that they're in charge of their own lives. And they tend to, here's another thing I've noticed is, I think that whether someone is high agency or low agency or somewhere in the middle, people tend to assume everyone else is the same. Okay, so I know you're a high agency person, despite the fact I've only spoken to you for a couple minutes. I know you're going to be on the higher end of agency. I'm a high agency person. So even by you asking me that question, we are assuming everyone has that capability and capacity. And if we can just come up with the right argument, or frame it the right way, or say the right thing, everyone's going to be high agency, yes. And everyone's going to take full responsibility, and everyone's going to be willing to go against the crowd, and so on. And that's not true. You can even look at it just in terms of leaders and followers. All through human history, in every single country, in every field, and at all times, there are far more followers than there are leaders. Always. You're never going to find a society or a company or a political structure or even a family where there are more leaders than there are followers. It's never been this way. It never will be this way because of this because of this spread of attributes. And also, society wouldn't really work, right? If everyone, it would be like if some people are like, oh, everyone should be an entrepreneur, right? Entrepreneurs tend to be very high agency. Entrepreneurs like to say, oh, everyone should just become an entrepreneur. And it's like, I understand on paper what they mean, but I'm just like, I don't think that's possible. Okay, so with all that said, I think the best you can do is kind of maybe move people up a couple notches. And if you've got people who are more in the middle, most certainly you can encourage and you can enable people to think more critically and more independently. We all have an identity and we all have a self-perception, the way that we would describe ourselves. Okay, we're talking about Bitcoin right here, right? You might even call yourself, a Bitcoiner, right? I might call myself a Bitcoiner. You might call yourself a Bitcoiner. Bitcoin is not it's not a religion. It's not a political belief system. It's certainly not meant to be any of these things, right? But even something like that, or supporting a certain sports team, if someone were to say that Bitcoin is stupid, or say it's a Ponzi, or say that it's a scam, or something like that, right? Even with something that is relatively detached from you, much more than, say, like personal faith or perhaps political opinions, it can still cause both of these things, right? Because people can interpret that as an attack on their identity, right? They don't view that as a criticism of Bitcoin or maybe the person misunderstanding. They take it as like a very personal insult. And once that happens, it's very difficult to have a conversation or to explain something, right? People tend to just want to respond back in kind with an insult. So people have to be able to, on all of these different ideas, kind of hold back from doing that and to ask questions, right? I often like to think, if you're not sure or you don't understand, right, ask a question. What do you mean by that? What do you believe, and so on? But also just to not take things personally, and to recognize that we all have beliefs and we have ideas and we have a worldview, but that's not directly who we are. So if someone was to question something we believe, or to disagree with it, or have an alternative take or perspective, that doesn't mean that they hate you as an individual, or they're attacking you, or they're insulting you, or they think that you are stupid, right? If someone wants to personally attack you, then that's a different thing. But I think most people aren't great at separating them all. So if you criticize one of their ideas or one of their beliefs, or you have a different one, I would say most people will take that personally, and they're not going to respond in a rational or even an intellectually honest way. And so I think that those would be two of the big ones. Number one, like I said, the emotional control overall. And then number two, recognizing that there is a separation between you as an individual and your identity and the things that you believe, even if you define yourself, and we all define ourselves very often by the things that we believe. So I'd say those are two of the big ones.
I don't know if you're seeing the hat here, like it's a little joke here, the INTJ, like the personality type stuff, right? Because I totally agree with you, but it's also in part how you are wired, right? So the INTJs are very just critical thinkers, also against authority, right? And so, for example, what has helped me a lot along the way is just to, and I really like try to be grounded in that. Just think like all these other people are just other people. Like any ruler, any person in some sort of organization, any person you might look up to is just another person figuring it out. Like they dropped here randomly in this meat suit and they're trying to figure it out as well, right? And so that has really helped me to just be like, okay, everyone is winging it. No one has figured it out. So there aren't really any good arguments as to why, for example, someone else should be ruling over me, right? And you can make it very practical for yourself. For example, when you look at governments, like in government, you mainly see a lot of ideas, but there's not that many receipts. What could help people is just to realize, there are other people that are just trying to figure it out as well. They have their own perception of themselves and their ego and their lives and their families and whatever their struggles are, right, in their lives. That has kind of helped me.
I often say there's 8 billion people in this world, and there are no two of them. They could be family members, they could be husband and wife, they could be father and son, they could be best friends. There are no two people who 100% agree on everything. And so to live in a world of over 8 billion people and not have it just be complete chaos and a war zone, you ultimately have to accept and become very comfortable and okay with the fact that there is going to be a gigantic amount of disagreement across everything. And we all need to be able to get on with each other. So despite these disagreements, despite the debates and the different perspectives and so on, I think it's always important to maintain civility and to maintain a certain core level of decency.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all time. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. Bitcoin is financial sovereignty, so why compromise when you need liquidity? Meet Debify, the Bitcoin-backed lending platform made by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Debify connects you to institutional-grade liquidity and allows you to borrow fiat or stablecoins, all while keeping your Bitcoin 100% under your control with a non-custodial 3 out of 4 multi-sig escrow solution. Get competitive rates from a global marketplace of institutional-grade lenders, with loan terms that you choose, from 1 month up to a year. There are no hidden fees and there is no rehypothecation, just pure Bitcoin-aligned lending with the highest level of transparency and security. Are you ready to unlock liquidity without ever selling a single sat? Go to debify.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to check out their current lending offers. That's debify.com/Bram.
Let's all agree that we're not going to beat each other up or kill each other or, do horrible, terrible things to one another because of these differences. I don't expect everyone in the world to be friends or even acquaintances or even to like each other. That's not realistic. Human beings are just too different for that, and we're not wired that way. But I do believe that at a minimum, we can all at least be civil with one another. And I think that, even if you just take a single city or you take a single country, that's got to be the sort of absolute bare minimum where it's like, okay. And by the way, this is what true tolerance actually is supposed to mean. Tolerance isn't meant to mean that everybody agrees and everyone celebrates everything all the time. It's just meant to mean okay, you know what? We could be really, really different, have very different backgrounds, perspectives, experiences, worldviews. We could be from totally different places, but you know what? We agree that we're not going to, physically harm each other or take each other's stuff. And those need to be the basic ground rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually, a while back I read something about individualism, that is not about everyone's on their own, but it's actually the respect for the other individual, that, literally what you just said, there are just other people and you have respect for their experience of their lives, and their perspective. And I think if you go way down, if I ask you what color is this, right? And you say orange and I say orange, but that's just a label that we created for this spectrum of light, right? I could never see how you see this color, and you could never see how I see this color. So just by definition, our entire experience of this reality is not the same.
There's something I've said a few times, and I think it also applies to information. So sometimes I say, take life seriously enough to be successful, but not so seriously that you become miserable. And I think it's the same with information, especially now, because we live in the digital era of infinite information and infinite opinions, right? There's no just in the small device in your hand or in your pocket. We have access to pretty much all the knowledge around the world that has ever existed, right? We have an infinite, there's infinite everything. There's infinite videos, infinite podcasts, infinite music, infinite news articles, infinite opinion pieces, infinite social media posts. They're being created faster than we can even consume them. And if you try to consume it all and dwell on it all and try to understand every single thing, if you try to understand every mechanism by which human beings interact and work and the way the entire world operates and the way the entire universe operates, I mean, you will go crazy. You won't be a happy person. You won't be content. You'll probably even struggle to have relationships with people and to be able to get on. Now, it's good to have, I believe it's very good to have a certain level of knowledge in many fields and not to be ignorant. I think it's good to have intellectual curiosity. I think it's good to have a level of care about things that are going on in the world, not only the things that 100% directly impact you, but also to have some awareness of things that are happening, on your street, in your neighborhood, in your society, in your country, in the world. I think it's good to have some idea of it. But that can also go way too far, where you are constantly obsessing and feeling sad or angry or frustrated, and you become paralyzed by just the sheer weight of the world you're trying to deal with, not just your own problems and not just the problems that are in your family or amongst your friends, but you're trying to deal with the entire world's burdens, all the sins, all the crimes, all the tragedy of humanity around the entire globe, and you're trying to deal with it all. And that's when people become very miserable. They can become depressed. They can become very nihilistic. And so I think we need to find that healthy balance between knowledge and ignorance, let's say, just like we find the healthy balance between many, many other things. I think that there is a sweet spot. And I think in the past, it was probably much easier to stay there because even if you wanted to have all this information, you didn't have the opportunity. It's only been about, I don't know, a couple of decades where we've had this instant access to so much information and communication. So it's now become an option. But, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our ancestors, none of us, no matter where we're from, our ancestors didn't have to deal with this, right? They were much more localized. And so their field of scope, their field of vision, their field of care was much closer to the things and the people around them. Whereas now it's been digitized, it's been globalized, and it allows awesome things like us to have this conversation and then beam it out to potentially thousands or millions of other people. But it also has the consequence that we're all just constantly overloaded with this flood of nonstop information and emotions and arguments and videos and pictures and audio. And yeah, it can certainly be overwhelming.
Yeah. I really want to ask you a question about that, but I had to think about. I don't know if you listen to Alan Watts, but I listen to him constantly, and I had to think about. And I just looked it up. He says, in Hindu mythology, they say that the world is the drama of God. I think that's what you just described, right? Like it's there is no good without evil, right? And stuff like that. So it is just what it is, and you can try to understand everything, and I think it's intellectually interesting and sometimes rewarding. But I fully agree with you. There's also, endlessly going down the rabbit hole also doesn't mean you're here, right? And just experiencing the gift that you've been given. You talked about the technology, right? So if we look at the current state of culture and media, you have played some part in that as well. How do you think we arrived at the point of all this polarization and distraction? And maybe to tie that in with the first question, like what role does kind of like personal responsibility play in reversing these trends? Because I think there are many outlets, podcast, X, etc., where people have genuine and interesting discussions and are sharing information that help other people learn. But yeah, there's also many people that just stay in the whole emotional fight, screaming on Piers Morgan, whatever. How do you look at that? Like, how did we get here? How did we let it get this far? And how do we get out of it? Like, what's your idea around that?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the first part, how did we get here? I think it's mostly a function of technology and technology amplifying human behavior. The thing with a lot of the technology that we use now is there is a manipulative or even predatory element of it, particularly if we're thinking about smartphones and social media, which is the way that most of us get our information and it's how we communicate day to day and so on. We all know at this point that the people who created these things and who work on them, they have great understanding of human psychology. They know how to develop algorithms. They know how to make things more addictive, to increase screen time, to increase advertising views, to increase watch hours, and so on. This is very different to previous technologies, which were a lot more static, let's say. They weren't things that were really like responding to you and trying to lead or push you in a certain direction or to feed you certain things that are customized based on your own personal preferences. It was just like, I don't know, look, here's a car. Your car takes you from, you drive a car, but your car's not addictive. Your car doesn't like, it's not like,
Yeah.
Maybe they're starting to get more.
Like,
okay.
You had to actually write a very good book.
Yes.
And that was just the package, right? And that's either good or not. And if it's good enough, then, it amplifies and people tell each other, for example.
Exactly. So technology is becoming a lot more unique and customized and a lot more capable and powerful and addictive. This is now happening with AI. And of course, AI is also being implemented into the existing technologies. So even things that previously were not as, were previously more static, even those are now becoming more and more tailored towards the individual so that you'll spend more time and, kind of go where the machine wants you to. I have a general theory, Bram, that most technologies, certainly high technologies, that they can either be used to free or to enslave. I think any powerful technology has the capacity to do both to different degrees. So a smartphone, right? We all have smartphones. A smartphone has the capability, if you use the tool in a certain way, you can use it to add a lot of freedom and liberty that you wouldn't have previously had to your life. At the same time, the technology can also enslave you. There are people who control their phones, and there are people who are controlled by their phone. I think we both see this every single day. All right. There are people who quite literally, they're so addicted to the phone that it hurts their personal relationships. It damages their physical health because they're spending so much time staring at this little screen that they're not going outside, or they're not eating properly, or they're not going to the gym, they're not exercising because they're so glued to a device. Same thing with social media. I think it's really fascinating because you can give the same tools to the same people. I think there's about 5 billion people around the world right now who are active on social media. We all have access to the same tools, right? You've got Facebook, you have Instagram, you have YouTube, you have X, you have TikTok, you have these different platforms. And I'm so fascinated by the different things people do with it. It's like you give all these people the same technology. Some people will use it to build a business. Some people become multimillionaires because of using the technology. They go and they build an audience and they create something and they sell things and they promote and they create courses and they do consultations and they sell products and services, right? There's people who do that. And then there are people who destroy their lives with it. So you have people who are like, social media is evil, or, smartphones are evil, or this is terrible. And people always like to blame the technology, right? People always like to blame the technology. If somebody gets killed, people want to blame the knife or they want to blame the gun. Sometimes they won't even want to talk about the individual or the people who did these things. It's just that, we need to regulate knives, or we need to regulate guns, or it's like all of us.
The ends of the knives need to be blunt or something. Where's that in Canada or UK?
Dude, UK. I'm from the UK, right? And I see these things and it's mind blowing, right? In the UK, in the US, obviously, it's more about firearms and stuff. But the truth is, every single person, no matter what country you live in, I'm just going off on a bit of a tangent here. We all have access to deadly weapons. These things are tools, and the problem is always within the human heart. Okay, mm-hmm. When people are stealing or robbing or killing or assaulting or whatever, it's sure, technology can make it more efficient and be done in certain ways, but it's just like, it's not the technology itself. It's the human behind it. Always, it's the human that is behind it. And so I just think that as tech gets more and more advanced, and by the way, I think this is going to be a big challenge for us as like fathers and anyone who's listening, who's a parent, is, our children are going to deal with all sorts of new challenges in the same way that the challenges we dealt with as millennials are not the same challenges that our parents or our grandparents. Some of them are the same. Some things don't change, but we're constantly like kind of moving into this brave new world, and we're going to have to like teach our kids how to use the technology and use all of this information in a way that benefits them, benefits their future family, benefits their society, benefits their community, instead of just becoming these like, zombies on one end where you're just a slave to the tech, and on the other end where it's actually like genuinely harmful, right? Where it's like mentally and physically and emotionally people are deteriorating because they're allowing the technology, they're using the technology for such bad, and they don't know how to filter it and control their information diet. And I use that word very intentionally when I say diet, because the exact same thing is actually happening with actual food, right? Food and nutrition, that is also going on. I mean, around the world, for the first time in human history, obesity is a bigger health risk than starvation. This has never been true before. Now, there are more obese people around the world than there are hungry people. So the more society progresses, the better technology gets. I think the more and more careful, I think the more disciplined you have to be, because you have so much more option and opportunity. Yeah. Right? 100 years ago, I don't know, what were the options for vices? I guess, you could be an alcoholic, you could be violent, you could maybe have a gambling problem, or you could like smoke too much, right? Drugs, like these were kind of all the opportunities. Now, all of that still exists, but we have like 100 new, we have all of these new vices, right? If you want food, like you have infinite access to like all of the stuff our ancestors wouldn't even recognize as food, right? Everything that you want, all the processed garbage, it's everywhere, it's cheap, it's abundant. So you have to have more self-control and more discipline in certain ways. Our grandfathers didn't have the option to sit around all day scrolling through social media or just playing video games or watching YouTube videos or whatever it is, watching online pornography. Like they didn't even if they had wanted to, the option didn't exist. And now, and the more time goes on, the more and more these options are just literally at our fingertips. And so I think you just have to be more and more careful with your diet. When I say your diet, not just what you're putting in your mouth, but what you're putting in your eyes, what's coming in through your ears, the people you're paying attention to, the people you're following, and who are you allowing to influence you. I just think you have to be a lot more discerning and a lot more careful. And on the very positive side of that, there's never been a better time to be able to connect with and communicate with incredible and brilliant people all around the world. Anything that you want to learn, you can learn through that same technology, through that same internet, smartphone, social media, whatever it is you want to learn about, you can. 100 years ago, if you wanted to become like an investor and you wanted to learn about investing in companies, or you wanted to learn about, law or engineering or how to build a table, anything, how to do mechanics on a vehicle, it was very difficult to do, even just a couple decades ago. And now it's just like you've got free or very, very cheap access to all of this stuff. So again, it's up to the individual. How are you going to, which person are you going to be? Like, how are you going to spend that time? Are you going to just doom scroll and troll and waste time, filling yourself up with negativity and nonsense? Or are you going to take a few hours out of your day or out of your week and learn something new, build a new skill, dive into something that interests you? But, Bitcoin's a great example. Maybe how many hundreds of millions of people or billions of people are out there who have like, they've heard of Bitcoin, but they haven't even spent 1 hour researching it. It's like, well, why don't you, right? Instead of commenting on my posts for years and years and years, telling me that you don't understand it, it's like you're already on your phone. So instead of telling me that for the past 5 years, like that's a really expensive, that's quite an expensive mistake in my book. Okay, if since 2016 or 2017 or 2020 you've been saying every time you hear Bitcoin, you're saying, "Oh, I don't understand it. I don't get it." It's like, okay, take 2 hours. Take 2 hours in this next week and do a little research, right? Like your future self may thank you. Your children may thank you that, oh gosh, I'm so glad that my dad looked into this thing. So now 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, we're in a much better position because you know what? Like he took 2 hours out of his day to do a little bit of research on this new and exciting technology that all of the, that so many people have been talking about for over a decade.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want. Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read. And it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order.
No, it's so interesting because it's such a weird time that we live in. And I think it's also weird that we can talk about how weird it is. You know, if you think about like 200 years back, stuff was just happening, or even First World War, Second World War, people just lived through that, not understanding where like that event over many years is placed in history, if that makes sense. And like now we're living through this whole fourth turning idea, this emergence of AI. I think in general, to tie to what you said also with social media, like idiot people, or malicious people, or crazy people have always existed, right? So yes, they didn't maybe use guns, they used, I don't know, just sticks or whatever, like branches to kill people, right? Or they talked crazy stuff. There was a crazy guy in town, but now everyone's opinion can be broadcasted to the rest of the world, right? So it's become way more noisy on one side, and on the other side, the whole democratization of information through the internet, the fact that anyone can get to any type of information that's ever existed is incredible. So I also think, and I wonder what you think, like this is also a really spiritual time in a sense. Like I do feel we can go, or there will be people that go one side, right, the slave to the technology and the CBDC, give me some discount when I use my CBDC and I'll, scan my eyes and whatever you're going to need to do, right? And there's going to be people that counteract to that and actually, I think, will be less technological. Like they will search for less technological spending of time and stuff like that, like go way back into nature. But it feels like in this time that we're going through, like that's going to be really amplified, the difference between people that we talked about in the beginning, and the fact that we can actually reflect on it and think about it doesn't necessarily make it more clear, I would say, right? So in that sense, the ignorance is bliss, right? But yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you think about that spiritual part? Because I do think it's more like the whole thinking for yourself. How, why am I here? What does life mean? And all these things, like all these questions in my perception are becoming way more important, because there is just so much happening around you that you could be aware of, and that many people are also aware of, whether they like it or not. What do you think about?
Yeah, well, I think we're getting into very deep territory here, because we're getting into the metaphysical and the philosophical, and certainly the religious and theological realm. And I don't think that is surprising. I think that it's inevitable. I think that even with all the push for secularism and for scientism and progressivism and getting away from all the isms, right? All the push with technology. Yeah. I think it's already forcing more and more people to sort of ask those eternal questions. When we even say the words good and bad, or good and evil, what does that even mean? I think to someone who has a traditional religious faith, I'm a Christian, I think that the answers to those are relatively straightforward. But for someone who doesn't have that worldview, they still use that language, right? They'll still talk about good and bad and, good and evil and so on. But I think that it's increasingly less obvious what those words even mean. Like maybe they themselves, I'm sure there's people who have really thought about it, but I think oftentimes people use these words and they don't really know. They're talking more about a feeling than anything that's particularly tangible. And I think that with a lot of the artificial intelligence stuff and with the robots and talking about replacing humans and this, I think it's kind of forcing those conversations of like, wait, like, is this, is this good? Is this bad? Is this evil? Are the people who are behind this, like, what's the motive here? If you're talking about how, you're going to replace hundreds of millions or billions of people and their jobs, which give them, purpose and meaning and help them provide for their families, you want to replace that with AI or robots or whatever. I think there's a very fundamental question of like, wait, why? Like, is that a good idea? What are the consequences of this? Where does this lead? What does this mean for future generations? I guess in a way, it's good that those conversations are being had. Me personally, as someone with, I guess what you could call a more traditional religious worldview, I absolutely believe in good and evil, and I believe in spiritual warfare. And I believe that technology is an amplifier. I don't think that technology inherently is, good or bad. Maybe there are some technologies which are, mostly very much good and some which are mostly bad. But again, as we said before, it mostly comes down to an amplification of the user. Okay. So if you give a very evil person or a very evil group of people an incredibly powerful technology with lots of destructive capacity, they could quite literally, blow up a city, right? Like wipe hundreds of thousands or millions of people off the globe, right? Like that can happen. You can just look at like nuclear weapons is the most obvious example of that. But at the same time, if you give people a technology or, a whole technological field like medicine, like we generally think of medicine as like something that's a great good, but even in the field of medicine, right, there's huge capacity in that realm of knowledge, right? The same knowledge that teaches you how to like heal people and save lives, like at the same time, you also are learning like how to end a life and how to physically harm people. So I think that there's spiritual warfare going on. I believe it's been like that from the beginning. I think it's been like that since the creation of humanity. And what that looks like changes. There are always the same patterns. The people change, the location changes, the technology changes. But I think there's always going to be that battle. And if I can just speak frankly in that language, I think that Satan, the great forces of evil are always going to be trying to, use and manipulate people towards those ends and put technology in their hands that they're going to use towards negative, evil, wicked ends. And at the same time, there are going to be people who are pushing back against that and trying to fight it, whether with the technology or without the technology. And on a very basic level, I think that's kind of the fundamental struggle of humanity. And I don't think it's kind of simple as, good people and bad people. It's also within ourselves, right? Because we all have the capacity for good, and we have the capacity for evil. And so the more powerful, influential, wealthy, successful, the more powerful you are in any way. That's why people say, with great power comes great responsibility, because the more of that you have, and technology is giving more of that to even just the sort of average man or woman, the more careful you have to be with it. It means you have a greater capacity to do good. And if I look at my own career over the past 20 years, I would certainly like to think and believe, and I think most people who know me would believe, that I do a good job to do my best to use that as a net positive and a net good, and to use all my communication channels and the millions of people I have access to via them to, encourage, uplift, motivate, teach, try to shift people overall in a better and more positive direction. But at the same time, I could use it in a very, very, very different way. I could use it purely just to enrich myself without any care for ethics. I could use it to push messages that are potentially very destructive and divisive, and which don't inspire or motivate people, but they make people angry and hostile towards each other, and they make them more likely to do things that could harm themselves or harm their other people, and so on. And maybe that's something that's weird about it. You used the word democratization before, and that is what's happening with platforms and with information. In the past, very few people had the ability to reach thousands of people, let alone thousands of people across the world. Now, millions of people have that capacity. You could argue billions, because even someone who doesn't have a big social media following, they could have one post or one video that they put out there, which kind of catches the algorithm, or it gets boosted by someone very prominent. And all of a sudden, millions of people are seeing or hearing what they're saying. And so what's that message going to be? And is it a message that, pushes us in a better direction? Is it one that pushes us in a worse direction? And, these are things that I've been thinking about these things for a pretty long time, because I'm in a bit of a weird position just by the nature of what I do. It's not really a natural position to be in. It's cool. I love it. I like it. I like the fact that there are many people around the world who want to listen to me and care about my opinions and the things I have to say. But there's also a part of it that's a little bit scary, because I recognize all of these things that we're talking about, and there isn't really a blueprint. There's not a long history of this technology and this capacity for me to look at and see, okay, this is the right way to handle it. This is the best way to do this. This is the best way to do that. I'm still figuring it out myself. Lots of people are figuring it out. And it's all very new, but I just do my best. That's all.
I once saw a video where a guy who has 1 million followers on TikTok, I think, talked about how he and 2 or 3 of his friends also have 1 million followers on TikTok. We're talking about, how many people do you think a king in the 1500s would have spoken to directly? Right? So how many people in total do you think would have listened to the King of England speak? Not even one time, just in his entire life, right? And they talked about, maybe 200,000 people or something, right? Where you actually saw the king having a speech somewhere physically, right? And then they were talking about, but that king has like a certain type of power in the real physical world, whereas there are many people now, as you said, right, that have, let's say, 1 million plus followers. You are one of them, but like, how do you exert that power in the physical world, right? So the digital power is way different than the physical power.
There's something you said there which kind of brought to mind just another interesting thought I have floating around my head, which I haven't really articulated much before, but just the concept of legitimate authority. Because I think oftentimes, particularly in the Bitcoin space, for example, it tends to be far more libertarian and far more independent-minded and anti-government, let's say, than the average person by far, right? Like it's not slightly, but the average Bitcoiner is not the average person. And so the way we think around these things, it can be so like almost like, anarcho-capitalist or minarchist or so individualized. And I think, the reality is that a lot of people hear the word authority and they view it, someone of that kind of mindset, they view it, they have a natural negative reaction to it. And I don't actually think that is correct. I think people shouldn't be anti-authority, but anti-illegitimate or anti-incompetent authority, yes. Right? Like power is not inherently bad. Influence is not inherently bad. Authority is not inherently bad. Like ultimately, like authority has to exist. I mean,
yes,
it has to exist within families.
Go ahead. Yeah. Well, what you said in the beginning, like, I don't think I would want to lead a country. So I'm okay if there's other people that lead a country or set a strategy or, some sort of top-down thing. I'm not necessarily like anti-government, but I'm thinking about the word receipts a lot that I mentioned before.
Yes.
Okay, people give you a certain power. That is your responsibility for an X amount of time. You get to sit on the seat. And if you don't deliver, you should be removed from the seat, yes. And someone else should try it, right? It's just, I don't know if that's overly simplistic, but that's kind of how I view it. But those checks and balances that are there on paper in reality, aren't really applied. Much.
It's interesting, Bram, that you even use the word receipt, because even when we think of like a receipt from, something we go and we buy a product or a service and we get a receipt. A receipt is multiple things. It's proof of purchase, of course, but it's also, it's also a proof of legitimacy, if you think about it. So I think proof of delivery, right? So I think when we talk about receipts in a more sort of political sense or an authoritative sense, it's proof of legitimacy. It's like, okay, if we are going to have an authority or various authorities in various areas of our lives, we want those authorities to be legitimate, and we want them to be competent. So, it doesn't matter if you're talking about a military regimen, or you're talking about a company, or you're talking about a prime minister or a mayor or a governor. You want them to be competent, right? You shouldn't be in those positions if you don't know what you're doing and if you're not capable of getting results. And you should also be legitimate. In some nations, what grants legitimacy is a fair voting system and being selected by the people. It can also be, competence itself can be a form of legitimacy. But there have to be those kind of structures. And I think, if I look at what's going on in many Western countries, I actually think this is, it's so interesting. We're kind of going deep here. I think one of the big problems that we're having is authority, the legitimacy and the competency of authority is diminishing, both in terms of their actual capabilities, but also in terms of the public perception. So I think people are less trusting of politicians than they were in the past. They're also less trusting of the media. They're also less trusting of big corporations. They're also less trusting of the medical establishment, like the law enforcement, like almost everything that had that authority is being questioned and challenged. Of course, this is happening with religion as well. If you look at like European countries, in under 100 years, pretty much all of them have gone from being like very strongly Christian to being like, Christian on paper, the dominant religion, but like lots of people not really believing or following, lots of churches closing down, like all of this. It looks a bit different in every country, but this is the general trend. But at the same time, there's this like increase in, how would I put it? I don't really mean an increase in freedom, but maybe like an increase in the desire for freedom and liberty. So people kind of want like, I feel like people increasingly want all the rights and none of the responsibilities. And this is manifesting in all sorts of very strange ways. And it's not really helping society. I think like so many people are kind of stuck in this permanent adolescence where they want all of the rights and all of the privileges, but they don't want responsibility or accountability, right? So they want to be able to do whatever they want in their personal lives and in their business lives and in their whatever, but they don't want to take on those consequences and say, okay, cool, we have these rights, we have these liberties, we have these freedoms, but this also comes with huge responsibility. By the way, coming back to Bitcoin, this is something I really like about Bitcoin because it embodies and teaches a lot of these principles. Okay, so it's like, okay, not your keys, not your coins. Okay, so like you've got this right, you have this freedom, you have this liberty, but you also have a huge burden of responsibility and accountability on your part because you can't just outsource it as we've always been able to in the past. So it's like, cool, you've got this great power, but you've also got to be really responsible to it. It also changes people's time preference, right? So instead of thinking so short term, you start to think more long term. In the past, of course, this always happened when people had children, right? So whether you're a man or whether you're a woman, oh my gosh, all of a sudden you've got a whole new human being who's helpless and is relying on you. And that forces you to become more mature. It forces you to think more long term. It forces you to take more responsibility and accountability for your actions. But increasingly, in developed countries at least, people are able to kind of like avoid lots of these different things that would, kind of force these responsibilities on them. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the, the division and the chaos, particularly in big cities. And there's just this, I don't know, a constant sense of, it doesn't feel very orderly. It feels a bit like a little bit of a free-for-all, and people seem to be more agitated, maybe a bit more miserable, a bit more against each other than they were before. The sense of community and the fact that, okay, cool, like we've all got all of these things in common, that seems to be breaking down. And, this isn't the first time this has happened. I just think this is our sort of modern version of it. I'm very aware that all throughout history, you mentioned First World War, Second World War. So I'm not going to even, I'm not here talking about, sometimes I hear people being like, oh my gosh, Europe has never been in a worse state, or, Americans have never been so divided. I'm like, what about like World War I, World War II, the Civil War? Like I can think of quite a lot of times when human beings were more divided than they are now and more agitated and aggressive than they are now. But I don't want us to, I'd like that we learn from history and we avoid that. So when we start to see ourselves sort of trending in some of these directions, I think it's good to sort of take a step back and let cooler heads prevail and to just think of like, okay, let's refocus again on the things that we should be focused on. And let's just have some adults in the room. And I think this is one of the things I love about podcasts, because I think that the format itself tends to lend itself both for the participants and the listeners to just more nuanced thinking, more open-minded, like this format versus the sort of 10-second videos that people are just swiping through. Like it creates a very different state of mind. So I think it's good.
Yeah, I love that you used the word outsourcing. I use that as well, like outsourcing your responsibility, right? And especially in the West, that is also the opportunity that other people take to abuse that you want to do that, right? That you want to outsource the responsibility over, for example, guarding your money, right? I think a lot of people have the idea that the bank is like what Scrooge McDuck has, like his little vault thingy, and there's like all these coins and bills and stuff like that. And I think that is how their money is guarded. You know, I had discussion with a friend of mine who I've been, you know, pitching and sometimes screaming, you know, Bitcoin to from like 2, 3, 5,000 euros, dollars, whatever, you know, and at like 95 or 100K, I got a message. Okay, I think I'm ready. I said, okay. But then he said, you know, he's quite wealthy. He said, okay, so but if I have 1 million in Bitcoin, I have to secure it. I said, yes. And he said, that's fucking scary. I said, yes, correct. You know, but that's exactly what you're talking about. And I think I mean, Bitcoin has been a big trigger for me to start thinking about, okay, what are all the other things that I'm outsourcing in my life? Am I actually okay with the fact that I'm doing that, right? Because you could be okay with doing that if it was a conscious decision.
Yeah, man. You're spot on, and you bring to mind another couple thoughts. Number one is that I often say that you have to remember that most people are conservative. And when I say that, you know, I think people are so highly politically charged that they think I mean that, you know, they vote right wing, right?
Yeah. You mean low risk?
I mean, people are in their comfort zones. The average person is not a huge fan of change. People, like, if you want to predict what someone's going to do tomorrow, look at what they did today, look at what they did yesterday, and you can predict pretty accurately. Like, most people's lives don't change that much over time. Like, they do what they've always done. They believe what they've always believed. Most people are conservative. They are averse to change. So when you have something like Bitcoin is extraordinarily radical. I think that once you've like been in Bitcoin for some time and you know lots of people in the Bitcoin world, like, you have to remember only 4% of the world has even a single Satoshi. So 96% of people, even after 15 plus years, right, they're on 0.0000. And this is with all the promotion, all the advertising, all the news articles, all the hype, like, you know, 96% of people still know. Because it's such a revolutionary idea. Like, money has, like, most people don't really know what money is. Like, if you ask them and you drilled them, most people can't really describe money. But people don't really have never sort of questioned it. It's just assumed that, you know, the government prints money, and, you know, central banks just print money and it goes into the system somehow, physically, digitally, and there's always going to be inflation, and inflation's inevitable. Like, lots of people think inflation is good. And of course, you know, they also think, you know, taxes have to be there. Like, they've been stuck in the system. The system has existed since well before either of us were born. That's how it is. It was like that for our parents or grandparents. Like, it just goes like that. And so when you come along and you're like, okay, there's this like new form of money, and it's not controlled by any government or any country, any central bank. We don't even know who made it. There's only 21 million. It's capped. You can't make more. It's purely electronic. There's no physical component. You know, you get the questions like, what? It's not backed by anything. There's no central bank. There's no military. There's no, you know, you get all the usual things, right? Like, it's, you know, it's not backed by anything, right? Like, again, these are people they'll be saving in fiat talking about all of this. So it's because of this conservative mind. It's because, and I say this as someone who, like, funnily enough, like, socially and politically is more conservative, but when it comes to certain ideas, like, I'm very willing to listen to and embrace new ideas that make sense and that fix a problem. And most people don't really recognize how broken the money system is. And even those who do, their approach to countering it, as you've said, tends to be more conservative. Of course, real estate has made sense for centuries, millennia. So of course people understand real estate. People understand gold, like, because, I mean, gold has been around for thousands and thousands of years. So if you're, you know, trying to get people onto something like Bitcoin, it's much more complicated. What was the other point I was going to make? So number one, people being conservative. Then the second point is, a lot of people don't realize that everything has risk. So a lot of people think that the safest thing to do with your money, like, I know people who don't invest at all. Like, they make a decent income. They don't invest anything because of risk. So they just put the money in the bank, and in their brain, that is low risk. We know the reality is every year, like, let's say 4 to 8% of that money, its purchasing power, is being eaten away. right? Like 8% of it may as well just be being burned every single year. Like that's the reality of if you just keep your money in the bank. Because of the broken money system, just to maintain purchasing power, you must invest in some way. And there's no risk-free investment. Even like, bonds, stocks, real estate, even the things that people consider secure, gold, they all have some risk. So a lot of people are averse to Bitcoin because like they see the volatility, and to a lot of people, volatility and risk are the same thing. They're not the same thing, but people see the volatility and they're like, no way, that is too risky. And most people are very short-term thinkers. So this is why, okay, Bitcoin is where it is right now. But let's say 1 year from now, let's say Bitcoin is at $60,000 this time next year. Right? There will be people who are like, see, I told you, right? Like, Bitcoin's a scam because you were talking about it. It was 105 and now it's 60, right? They don't want to look at the 3-year period, 5-year period, 8-year period, 10-year period, right? It looks completely different on a longer time frame. It's at the end of the day, Bram, you know what all this comes down to is part of the reason I don't go crazy is I just do what I can do and I let the chips fall where they may. If you think that you can convince everybody about anything, you're going to go nuts, right? Like we all believe that we are right. Almost by definition, every single person believes that they are right and that the way they do things, the way they approach things is correct. Or at least, very close to it. So changing someone's mind on one thing is already very, very difficult in most cases. And with a lot of things, like you simply can't. You have to you can just drop breadcrumbs and you can talk about what you talk about, but everyone will, stumble across the thing and believe in it or not on their own volition. It's why, Bitcoiners like to say, everybody will get Bitcoin at the price they deserve, because the sooner you open your mind and you do a little research and you drop your guard and you allow yourself to be orange pilled, the sooner you do that, then the lower your price entry is going to be, right? And the later you leave it, I can guarantee. I think it's almost inevitable that Bitcoin is going to go on to be worth multi-millions in terms of dollars. Okay, and you and I both know that Bitcoin can be at $1 million. And the exact same people are still going to be saying it's a scam, it's a bad investment. Ponzi, I'd rather have right. Like it actually doesn't matter. Like so that can happen at 1 million, 5 million. There can be a point. Bitcoin is 10 million, and someone has been arguing from 1K to 10 million. The same person has been arguing and fighting you. You've been there trying to tell them, hey, maybe you should look into this. Look, let me explain it to you. I'll show you how to. And some people are just they're just that hard-headed, And then, of course, at that point, they'll be mad at you for not telling them. But I don't understand it. I don't think that I'm like this. That's not my personality type. But I've just accepted that, there's some people like that in the world, and it's not actually very uncommon. And a lot of times people will not understand something or get on board with something until the majority already has. That's just the truth. It's why you get those S curves, those S adoption curves, right? At the beginning, it's always going to be weird, and it's going to be a minority, and it's going to be foreign, and it's going to be geeks and radicals and people who are, these extremist sort of types. And then there will come a point where it's just as ubiquitous as the internet, email, smartphones, social media. All of these things in our own lifetime have gone through the S curve. I remember I've been on Facebook since 2004, over 20 years. When it was October 2004, what were people saying about Facebook? This is stupid. Nobody uses it. It's too slow. There's no point. This is never going to take off. No one's going to use it, blah, blah, blah. The same thing with mobile phones, the same thing with smartphones, the same thing with email, the same thing with the internet, the same thing with Amazon. I remember when people thought Amazon was going to be, nobody buys books online. Who buys things online? That's not, this is going to fail. Tesla, what the heck? Who's going to start? Now people are used to the concept of electric cars. Just 20 years ago, the idea of building a whole company that only makes electric vehicles was completely insane. It was completely insane. Less than 20 years later, all of a sudden, boom, everyone wants people want Teslas and all these EVs and stuff. And so, I don't know. I see Bitcoin, like everything I hear people say about it, I'm just like, okay, I've heard this all before. And the last point I'm going to make on all this, and this circles back around a lot of the things we've been talking about, is ultimately, in the long run, we're going to see who's right. So as much as people may want to like fight and argue and debate and have all these discussions and so on, I'm like, you know what? Let's come back in 15 years, 2040, 2035, 2040, 2050, set your timeline. Let's come back and we'll see who's right. Okay? So Mr. Gold, Mr. Bitcoin, Mr. Real Estate, Mr. XRP, Mr. Ethereum, Mr. like whatever your thing, right? Let's see. Okay? Like, because past performance doesn't mean future performance. So I think, I know which boat I'm on. You know what boat you're on, right? People are kind of placing their bets now. So we'll see, in 15 years time, in 20 years time, we can come back and be like, okay, let's look at let's look at this and, whose predictions were correct. So that's also why I don't get frustrated. Like I have a point where I'll explain it up to a point and then I'm just like, you know what? I respect your belief. You can believe what you want. And we shall see.
I love that actually. What did you say about where the chips? Let the chips fall where they may fall, right? Like I love that because only you can know if you did the work to make the decision that you're making right now, right? So, and that's what I in general love about the Bitcoin journey is you're constantly, especially in Bitcoin, confronted with people that say stuff like you said, like it's a scam or a Ponzi or whatever. So you're constantly challenged to kind of like answer the question, can I still trust myself, my own judgment, my reflection, the work I did. That's what's actually built my conviction further, because I know I can honestly say that I put in the work and I'm making a conscious decision to put my chips on this thing, literally, and all my time and energy. And other people are doing that on other things or not at all, and they're not even aware of it, right?
This is also where the sort of asymmetric bet concept comes in. Because, all the naysayers, right? Let's say, okay, I always like to steel man other people's positions, okay? So let's assume that, the people who are like super anti-Bitcoin and they think it's just a scam or a Ponzi or so on, like thus far, that's not going well for them, right? If you've been saying that for the past 5-10 years, and you've just been sitting on the sidelines on zero, and you're just saying scam, 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 scam while it's going up thousands of percent, I'd say that's an L on your part. But if it's like, okay, I'm saying, okay, I think in 20 years' time, like this asset is going to be in the, market cap is going to be tens of trillions at the minimum, right? If I say that, and I'm wrong, okay, I'll take some financial, let's take the most extreme. Let's take the Bitcoin is going to zero people. I don't even know how that's like mathematically possible, because it would mean like every single Bitcoiner sell, like it's not even mathematically possible. But but let's say, okay, it goes to zero. Okay, in that case, like what happens? We lose some, we lose a chunk of, our wealth. Let's say it goes to, let's say 10 million. Okay. If you are sitting on zero from, wherever, like from 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, and you're sitting on zero all the way up to it running that far, like I would not be able to, I'd struggle to live with myself. And I'd feel like for my children, I have done them one of the greatest disservices possible. It would be like, imagine if you had an opportunity to buy real estate in like the capital city of your country, or in New York or in London or something, and you had the money and you had the ability to buy it, like, back when it was like a few $1,000s or pounds or euros, and you didn't. You're just like, oh, it's a scam. Real estate's a scam, blah, blah, blah. And you never made that investment. Like, that doesn't just affect you, your future children, your future grandchildren. Like, you had the opportunity to create generational wealth. I believe that in every generation, you get an opportunity that's just like a generational wealth opportunity. In the past, there have been times where it was real estate, where it was investing in a certain tech sector, a certain sector, or so on. I think with us, for us as like millennials, and say like millennials, Gen Z, I think like Bitcoin is that opportunity, right? It's just like that opportunity of like, dude, like, it's right here in front of your face. It's accessible to everybody. You don't need to be a millionaire or a high net worth individual. Like, anybody can get a piece of this. And once this boat has like totally left, it's not going to come back.
No, yeah, I have a question that ties into it. I mean, this is called Bitcoin for millennials, right? And I fully agree with what you said. Every generation, right? The boomers had real estate, Gen X had the S&P 500. Bitcoin is it for us. And I also think, just from our upbringing, seeing the analog world being translated into the digital world, having all these crises that we've seen, and the great financial crisis and stuff like that, like, this is it for us. And I love what you said, like, it's staring you in the face. And you have to realize that, just like you and I have to forget all like our entire educational or career path for our children in this exponential age of AI, right? Because that is going to be a total 180, or just a totally different paradigm from whatever our idea is of that, right? And we have to think about that for them. You have to realize that you have the same opportunity as compared to these other generations who actually had a pension and retirement. Like, for them, like, that welfare state and like that whole scheme still worked because they were there when it started. But for us, it's not going to be there anymore, right? And like you said, if the real rate of debasement is like 8%, it's probably a bit more. How are you going to retire in 30 years or 35 if you have to live until you're 70, right? Like, numbers wise, just mathematically, it's not going to work out. So I always share, like, that's the greatest realization that you should have. There is no pension for you, which is very rough, but okay, like, just accept that. Okay, what do I do? What do I do? And I think it's Bitcoin, and it's staring you in the face, but you have to overcome these challenges.
Like many things in the world, it's not easy, but it is simple.
Yes.
At least the basics, right? Because you don't need to understand everything. It's a bit like, I'm a big advocate of taking care of your body, nutrition, exercise, working out, lifting weights. Like, it's very simple. It's simple, right? It's not like, strength training is not the most complicated thing in the world. Eating a healthy diet day to day, eating 2 or 3 healthy meals a day, it's not particularly complicated. It's hard, especially in the modern world and with all the stresses and running around, but it's very, very simple. And I think part of the thing that, I think particularly with like more wealthy people and more traditionally successful people and more educated people, sometimes Bitcoin is a harder concept for them to understand because of the simplicity, right? So wait, you're telling me I could just put X amount of my money every month into this one thing, right? Because everyone's been taught I need to be diversified. I need to be in this market and that market and real estate and bonds and equities and this percentage and that. But you're telling me I could just put like 10% of my paycheck, 20% of my paycheck every month into something called Bitcoin for 5 to 10 years, and I'm going to like end up in like the 1%. Like that's it. I don't need to I just do that and secure. Like, I mean, if you've done that for the past 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, you would be better off than pretty much any other investment strategy. But that sounds way too simple, right? Like, there's financial advisors, there's investment bank. Like, why do you need all these complicated people if you can just, if it's just that easy, right? So I think people are just like, there's that natural skepticism of just like, wait, that sounds way too simple. It's got to be more complicated. And if it's that simple, it's got to be a scam.
It's so funny because my reply would be, it is made this complicated because that is the veil of the Ponzi, right? That's the whole abstraction of the Ponzi, is you need other people who are more knowledgeable. Yeah, but it is, and that's why yes, when you pitch something like this, most people think like this is very snake oil salesman-y, right? Because you say, yeah, like literally you just exchange the bad money for the better money and you chill.
And wait,
and wait, literally wait, right? Like that's the dumbest investment advice or financial advice to ever exist, right? But I love that we touched upon this here. Going towards the end, like yes, it's that simple, but it's hard to grasp because you have to go through this challenge of first understanding what you're thinking or what the level of your actual understanding is, realizing that is not actually how it works, right? And that you are not an actor in this fiat money financial system, but you are a subject and other people abuse that. Like those are not nice things to realize. But I think once you get there and then understand that this is the only thing that you should do, literally just move from the bad money to the good money, and then you chill and keep on studying and informing yourself to combat, all the people that don't want to see it. That's it. That's it. And I think we should just emphasize this and repeat this more often, because slowly but surely this will trigger one by one certain people that are like, okay, now I'm done. Like now I'm gonna put in the work and watch some videos for a day, or read some books, and then in my opinion, the use case is pretty clear. The debasement of fiat money is mathematically assured. So yeah, it's what Lynn Alden says. Nothing stops this train. I think is very true, and that's just a realization that people need to get to. To wrap up, I want to ask you two more questions. If you could design like a roadmap for society to get out of all this stuff that we talked about, right? To move beyond the distraction, the division, or short-term thinking, what would be your first 3 steps?
Turn back to God. Fix the money. And get in good physical shape.
Awesome. All right, last question, and I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
Oh. Everybody is capable of way more than they believe.
Awesome. I love that, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, man, let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Nice one, bro. Appreciate it.
Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.